Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cube Pod episode 92. I'm John Furrier with Dave Vellante. Dave, salute to you.
Hello, Johnny boy. What's happening?
You're back.
Just landed from Texas. I was in Austin this week. Just got home.
A lot of Dell Technologies, and also the team was at Houston, Texas, for HPE. Had the big launch for
Yep.
some of their stuff. Got a great note from Krista on LinkedIn. That was awesome. We were here in Palo Alto. NYSE was in town, the whole contingent. Of course, the NYSE Wired community, founded by Brian Bauman, was in full blossom.
And
The,
you were a
and,
founder of that. No, aren't you a founder?
well, I'm the founder of theCUBE. theCUBE is an integral part of the NYSE Wired. We're like the GPU. Yeah, Brian and I collaborate on that. Brian's really the founder. He's leading the effort, which is a joint collaboration. theCUBE is a critical part of the media engine. But
Would you
really,
say we're the GPU? I love it.
we're the GPU of the Wired. Well, I mean, what's happening is that Brian Bauman and the NYSE have a business model, and the Wired is above that in this open community that sits on top of. And we joined in with the Wired, NYSE, now called Wired. I guess NYSE Wired includes us as well. We're part of it, as well as all the participants now joining. It's an open community, and the beautiful thing about the NYSE Wired community powered by theCUBE, or theCUBE plus NYSE Wired, is that the business model of theCUBE and SiliconANGLE Media, and the business model of the NYSE, and quite frankly, the business model of all the participants participating in that community, they take benefit of the openness of it as long as it maintains its pure formula, because there's demand generation of the business model and brand value of everybody involved. So there's no money making in the sense of being paid to do NYSE Wired and theCUBE and this open Cube global initiative that we've been working towards. It really is a testament of people coming together. And Brian and team have a whole brand guidelines. It's really awesome. But what this represents, Dave, is a whole nother era of social networking, right? So LinkedIn, Twitter, X, Reddit, all these social networks, Facebook, Meta, Threads, WhatsApp, Slack. I mean, everyone's talking, everyone's connected. And so the existing social networks are like the public streets, and everyone's on them, and they're doing things, VCs hand waving about their financing, people throwing haymakers, social network with networking on LinkedIn, getting jobs. That's like the public streets. What's happening now, that the phenomenon is that these new formations are happening where people come together and formed on top of the public networks and form these trust networks. And that's what's happening. And that became apparent because we had the CMO Leaders program series, CUBE plus NYSE Wired. And that was apparent because everyone's jobs are changing. So, like any evolution, you saw, DNS, keyword navigation, social networks. You saw every innovation has stacks that build on top of it and abstractions of new value. And in social networking, this new value is the combination of networks that form intelligent graphs and connections. And those connections are trusted. And, it hits our principles, which are, the three pillars of authentic conversations and content, original content, and then trust. And so it's really a phenomenon that's actually happening now. So I'm really super psyched. Brian Bauman is doing a great job. And the NYSE is thriving because they have a thriving brand, they have a thriving ecosystem, they have a thriving network at the hub in New York City, center of all the action, and that's just translated into this digital twin. So the combination of the
I would
Cube
add.
and NYSE is like a digital twin of the brands coming together, and as more people join, it gets more trusted and powerful. So it's not it'll be some point no one person or group will be it. It'll flower out into a beautiful thing.
And we said during COVID that, the hybrid model was going to be the dominant model. Everybody kind of knows that now. But to your point about digital twin, when these guys run physical events, and you guys just had a physical event out in California, and we have a digital version of that, and that is the ultimate hybrid. But the point is that people still want to make face-to-face connections, and that's what we've been doing with the NYSE. It's been
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. I mean, what it is that people and content come together around the media, the relationships form these trusted bonds, and it's a marketplace of ideas. It's a marketplace of people. It's a marketplace of collaboration, right? And people become friends. They become colleagues. So there's a lot of action in the community. And we always said that you extract more, you create more value than you extract is an ethos of community. And so this is just the beginning. I think this is going to be a standard concept that will grow very, very fast as people are already connected, right? So, by merging the Cube network with the NYSE networks kind of conceptually, you have a cross-pollination of more Wall Street people into the Cube network and more technical people into the NYSE Wired network. And the combination through media is just a public display of knowledge. And it becomes, pun intended, mix of experts, Dave. Mix of network experts is a term you heard during DeepSeek and all this AI conversation where our algorithm's got a mixture of networks, experts. Mixture of experts, MOE as it's called, is an AI concept. That's actually happening in the network. We have a mixture of experts together. Magic happens. So this is really kind of a very trendy but real infrastructure ad hoc development. And, we're perfectly positioned to enable that with theCUBE. And by combining the shared mission of Brian Bauman and others coming in like Elliot Donnelly and others, they're coming in with people and networks, reputation networks. Again, Dave, post-COVID, we talked about reputation protocols. We used to do a lot of work in crypto, blockchain. And so you're starting to really see really cool things happen. So that was a great week here.
Do you think Databricks is pissed that DeepSeek has got all this attention for MOE? Remember a year ago, it was like not a year ago, but last June it came out, or July, last summer anyway, with their DBRX, their LLM, and they talked about how they used mixture of experts and MOE, and
I don't think so. I think
nobody really
Databricks.
paid attention, but that was kind of novel at the time.
Well, I mean, first mover advantage for Databricks on having that. I mean, it's not like Databricks is using it as a marketing slogan. Databricks is actually building real tech. I think DeepSeek became such a popular thing where mixture of experts was blended into it as a key variable. I think that's just another straw on the camel's back, so to speak, to make it happen and make it more real for the mainstream. So I think Databricks has got to love this. Anyone who's in AI infrastructure loves what's happening because the software layers and the innovations in software are growing so fast. That's only going to propel more use of databases, data lakes, software that comes out. And Databricks did a great big deal with SAP this week, just announced yesterday. Databricks is winning because their software first, AI first approach to data is translating into developer value. And that's going to be transformative, right? So as the infrastructure with compute come in, you're going to see a lot more. I just had a great conversation with Chandra, who's the CMO of Neo4j, and he and I were talking about how important graph databases are. And what Chandra's doing over there, Chandra Rangan at Neo, he came from Google, by the way, and Sudhir's over there from Google. He ran a lot of that infrastructure like BigQuery and whatnot. He is so right on this whole notion that marketing's changing. He thinks lead gen's dead. And he's actually changed the system to not optimize for MQL, qualified leads, but for actual multiple progressions, nonlinear progressions. Sound familiar, Dave? Into bullseyes. And he's totally changed his conversion rates from 5% to 30 in customer acquisition, from touch to close. Unbelievable numbers. So you're starting to see real evidence. And our CMO Leaders series we had this week, which is streaming right now live on theCUBE.net, was over 35 experts. We had even CEOs from companies like Cato Networks, Shlomo Kramer, founder of Checkpoint, great guy. We had Carolyn Crandell, Janine Gianfreddi, who worked for the Obama administration, Rachel Thornton, who was with Amazon, now at Adobe Enterprise, Mandy Dhaliwal, who's at Nutanix, Serbi from Applied Intuition. These were leaders. And the list goes on and on. I mean, we had massive amounts. And some hot startups. Abhay from Typeface, funded by Madrona, he was on. I mean, these are game changers. Jyoti from Harness, they merged with another one of his companies. So you're starting to see it. And my favorite, by the way, one of my favorites was Bruce Cleveland, who's a veteran. He's CEO of Traction Gap. we had a broad range of people. Laura Heisman from Dynatrace, former VMware Citrix. I mean, these are experienced leaders. We had AMD, Akanasha, she was on. She was awesome. Remember her?
Yeah.
Akanksha from Dell. She's now
From
leading
Dell, yeah.
AI marketing at
Product
AMD.
chops, great product marketing chops. And
DDN was on. We had the DDN CMO on. He's like his budget's 3% for marketing. And so you start to see efficiency and leverage with productivity. So, there's so much good content. Check out that CMO leader series that we did here on theCUBE. And of course, Brian.
I wanted to comment on your Neo4j, the graph database. So that's, the two really high value pieces of real estate that are emerging in the software stack are the ability to harmonize the data so you can feed them up to agents in a trustworthy way, and you can actually apply AI everybody says you got to get your data act together. Well, what does that mean? A big part of it is going to be graph databases. So Neo4j and a sort of an emerging disruptor, relational AI, Mulham Aref's company. And then the other piece of real estate is the agent control framework, further up the stack. And there's some companies like Neo4j, like relational AI, like Celonis. UiPath is further up, doing the agent control stuff. Those are going to be increasingly important. And of course, application vendors are doing them within their stacks, like Salesforce is doing, like Palantir is doing, like Oracle is doing, like SAP is doing, like ServiceNow is doing. So, the big chatter in the community now is, okay, who's going to win? Is it going to be the application, the ISVs that have always sort of owned their own little stovepipes? And if they win, then we're going to have more sort of fragmented application stack. Or is it something going to emerge like graph databases that allow you to traverse applications and harmonize that data across applications? And that's the real holy grail for the really next wave of agentic. And it's going to take a while to unfold. Everybody's claiming 2025 is the year of agents. I think it's going to be the year of agent washing, but that's cool.
You mentioned UiPath. One of the groups that we're involved with that's been really leaning into theCUBE is FIF, Females in Finance. Megan McKenna, she's running a group. They just had an event at UiPath. And so, UiPath actively, positioned well for the agents coming in. You mentioned Celonis. Anyone in process management in the enterprise is key. And that's why I kind of was joking about this mixture of experts earlier, because I think the combination of that MOE and then domain expertise is huge in AI. I think that's going to end up becoming a big part of it. We were a lot of debates on theCUBE this week around agents, timing of it, and whatnot. So
your point about process is really important, and that's the really hard part. And Celonis is working on it. They're not. I mean, I think they're ahead of most, but they're still not there yet. And the point about UiPath, which is interesting, is their premise is that RPA robots are trusted. They're hardwired and they're trusted. And what their premise is have the agents engage the robots. And there's actually some merit to that, because if you just let agents go wild, doing their own thing, and they're not secured, that's going to be problematic for folks. So the UiPath premise is that the RPA is the plumbing, like Dave hits, cool, cold, clear water running through the pipes. And so it's going to be interesting to see, because Celonis is trying to take the whole enchilada. The UiPath is focused, further up. But in speaking to Dell, they've talked publicly about this thing they have called Next Best Action, which uses a lot of really interesting work on data harmonization and process. And of course, Dell, because they're Dell, they're doing it all on-prem. They're not doing it in the cloud. And as we've been talking about extensively, every customer that we talk to wants to build out their own on-prem AI center of excellence. It's just that they're doing all the experimentation in the cloud, and they're starting to build out. They're a little nervous because they got to spend some CapEx, not as much as the hyperscalers are spending, and they get a lot of work to do. They don't necessarily have the skills the big banks do, but a lot of enterprises don't. And then the other piece is, if you're going to bring AI in-house, you got to make some choices. Do you retool for liquid cooling? John, some of the people that we've talked to said, yeah, we're not set up for liquid cooling, but we got to, re-architect our data center. Others are going to say, look, I'm not going to do that. I'll stick with air cooled, And for my workloads, that's appropriate. And we'll be doing a lot of inferencing. And so there's a real spectrum. There's a real sort of bifurcated market right now out there.
Yeah, I mean the power and cooling thing's huge because like that's going to change how these clusters are built, right? You can have power and cooling in one cluster and maybe not in another, depending on the power envelope. So it's going to be very interesting. I mean, speaking of clusters, did you see that TSMC is considering taking a controlling stake in Intel's factories at the request of Trump's team?
Well,
It's unclear whether Intel is
uh,
open to the transaction, but
well,
TSMC.
Intel is got to be open to some transaction. Did you see the tweet I put out today? So I've been circulating that bold plan,
Mhm.
right? The bold plan to fix Intel Foundry.
Yep.
And I've been getting feedback from many folks, a lot of M&A folks, a lot of really smart private equity folks. And the feedback that I got, because you might recall, I was saying that the big internet companies, Amazon and Apple, et cetera, should NVIDIA, kick in 5 billion each, and then take a stake, and then private equity put some money in as well. And then you point the CHIPS Act money toward the raise 100 billion. You reset the cap table, give Intel a little lick off the cone because it's their equipment. Bring TSMC in the deal. And the quid pro quo is they have to bring skill sets over because basically what TSM is doing is they're saying, look, we're going to keep the hard R&D and the real fundamental work in Taiwan, and we'll do the finish work in the United States. That's not okay. We should make it a condition of the CHIPS Act money that they've got to bring skill sets and expertise and IP into the deal, and they take a piece of the action. The feedback that I've been getting is the proposal that Flora and I made, the cap table is too complicated. And deals like this, when you have too many cooks, are too complicated. So, and number one. Number two, the other feedback I got is private equity. It's a shitty deal for private equity because it takes too long to get a return, and Intel's Foundry is of negative value. So, but what the feedback I've gotten, private equity would be interested in doing is putting debt financing in. And that makes a lot of sense. So private equity puts in debt financing. And then what about the Amazons and Apples and Nvidia and Meta and Microsoft and Google? What do they get out of the deal? So instead of equity, the proposal is they put in commitments for wafer volume. Okay, in exchange for early access or good pricing, but the catch is they're going to have to take the wafers whether or not they work. So they're going to have to commit the cash. So why would they do this? And the reason why they should do this, in my opinion, and it has to involve the administration, is the administration should go to them and essentially make them do it in exchange for taking their foot off their neck and
Yeah.
saying, look, we're not going to try to break up Google. We're not going to, keep pounding Amazon. We'll relax those pressures, but you got to step up and throw in $5 billion a piece and commit to wafer volume to save Intel Foundry. And I think it's really important, John, to keep Intel independent. I also think it's important, and I asked this question of Matt Garman at reInvent, is it important to have advanced U.S. manufacturing onshore? He said, yes, absolutely. I said, is it important to have a U.S. headquarters? He said, I'm not so sure. I am more than ever convinced that it's important to have onshore U.S. Headquartered U.S. Ownership of that foundry because of what I was saying before. If the IP
Yeah.
stays in Taiwan or it stays in Korea or somewhere else, that's not good for the United States. It's got to be a U.S.-based headquartered company. And I think the third piece of that is I really want to see Intel stay independent,
Yeah.
not get
And,
acquired.
and it's a great bold plan. A good analysis on the cap table. I didn't look at the private equity angle, but what was interesting about TSMC this week is we've been digging into Abilene ever since Brian Bauman went down there from NYSE Wired to go look at houses and get the scoop there. We've been looking at all the action happening in Abilene, Texas, with the big Trump plan with expanding out the government infrastructure. Well, guess what's going on in Arizona? So we've been digging deep in both Texas and in Arizona. So TSMC already has a location in Arizona. I got access to some exclusive information around their plans, right? So I'm not going to report that yet, but I'll tell you, it is going to be big. Intel, looking at factories in Peoria and other areas, Arizona is Silicon Sands, right? So That's what they're calling it. And if you look at the growth opportunities, there's a lot of real estate options going on in both Texas and Arizona as meccas for silicon buildouts for data centers. So that is a huge piece for what's happening on the build out. Now, there's such a huge geopolitical overlay to this. And that's why that brought that story up because, at Trump's suggestion, it wasn't the report. It's not like they're talking about Intel getting, TSMC taking a stake. But, if Taiwan is invaded by China, then U.S. has to have presence. So everyone's trying to build their own chips. The other thing
Including
is,
ARM. Did you see that news? ARM. We should talk about that, but keep going.
Yeah, and I also found out that, and I didn't know this, it's probably reported, maybe it's not, but or maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm explaining information I shouldn't be saying, but I wasn't told it was confidential, so I'll say it. In Taiwan, TSMC has self-destruct mechanisms. It's like in Star Trek, blow up the ship before the enemies get it.
That's been discussed. It's out there.
So that's out there. Okay, good. So I didn't know that, by the way. So if the Chinese try to invade Taiwan, they're going to blow up the village, literally scuttle the ship, and then they got to move somewhere. So there's all these contingencies, right, around this. So I think the geopolitical landscape will be an ongoing conversation for us because
John, you have to make the following assumption: China will take over Taiwan. Assume that is a certainty. Assume it. Okay. Now what? Now what do you do if the United States?
We need sovereign chip capability.
Yep.
Period.
Yep. And it should be U.S. headquartered, not just U.S. Based. It's got to be U.S. domiciled, my opinion. And
so is that a Cold War build up? I mean, obviously the government has to put the cash up.
Well, the government. So I don't think the Biden administration and I don't think the Trump administration really understand the implications here. I think they understand that we need to have onshore advanced manufacturing, but the Biden administration was sprinkling around, money with the CHIPS Act. It's like somebody going to the racetrack and betting like 6 horses in the same race. It's like you're not going to make any money that way. And I think the Biden administration. The Trump administration seems to be all about their ideology. It's like, anti-China. And I think that I'd like to see them step back and say, okay, how can we architect something that is in the long-term interest of the United States? It's going to take at least 10 years, probably more like 15 years, and it's going to take at least $100 billion, probably closer to $150 billion before you've got a competitive foundry in the United States able to build advanced chips. And so make those assumptions and then, work backwards from there. And I don't think either administration really has a great handle on that from what I've seen in terms of their actions. Now, I'm sure there are people in the administration, both administrations, that deeply understand this, but, all the politics get involved and there's a lot of money sloshing around, but 50 billion is a joke. I mean, it's really nothing to save Intel.
The story about Bloomberg is reporting a story that Dell is really close and very near a $5 billion AI server deal for Elon Musk's xAI. This is the supercomputing project in Memphis. Looks like Dell's looking to win a large share of that build out. You just came back from HPE and their launches. They announced some Blackwell action. This is the servers around the NVIDIA GB200. This is essentially the AI factory. Huge demand for workloads, AI workloads, okay? Dell, Supermicro, HPE. These are the companies that are going to get the windfall. Again, this is server 2.0 market. And so you got to run software on these things. So I am super psyched to see some of these numbers being kicked around because now that CapEx build out that was traditionally facilities-based, data center power and cooling, you mentioned that. Now you got servers coming in over the top, the new kinds of servers. It ain't just the rack and stack servers. It's like a bunch of servers, and the numbers are like basically buying mainframes. So they're pretty significant deals. 5 billion isn't 5 million. It's 5B with a B. Billion. It's billion.
And Elon's building out 100,000, 200,000 GPU clusters. And so here's my thinking on this. You got to assume for a moment. there's within 12 to 18 months, that $330 billion that the big three hyperscalers plus Meta are spending, throw in Elon in there now too, at some point, that's going to taper. And that's when the companies like Dell and HPE and Supermicro and Lenovo are going to have to sell to the enterprise. Okay, so they got to figure that out. And right now, all the action's in the cloud and in these neo clouds and these big hyperscalers. And so that's what's going to occur over the next 12 to 18 months. These enterprises are going to be building out their own AI stacks, their own AI centers of excellence, and the on-prem infrastructure players have to build out bigger ecosystems and more robust ecosystems beyond, Red Hat and VMware, because VMware is going all internal, and that involves data platforms. It involves, governance. It involves ISVs. It involves securities companies. A lot of the startups, John, that we've been interviewing in our NYSE Wired series, a ton of these startups could add value on-prem, and they don't have a route to the enterprise. They don't have other than Amazon. They don't have a way to get to sell to the enterprise. So I think they would be enticed to go through the Dell's massive go-to-market, HPE. I don't know about Lenovo. I don't know as much about Lenovo and their go-to-market. Lenovo,
Yeah.
by the way, just as an aside, buying Infinidat. Be interesting to see if that deal goes through, given all the M&A.
I don't think the government will scrutinize Infinity. It's a nice tuck under.
Yeah, but what about, isn't Lenovo China? That could play.
We'll see. I don't know. I mean, that would be really kind of peeling back the onion a lot. I mean, hardware's not dead, Dave. I mean, HPE, Cisco, Juniper, they're all gut performing. Cisco had their earnings. Robotics was a big theme last year at GTC. NVIDIA, I got my pass, the analyst pass for GTC.
Nice. Can we talk about Cisco for a second?
Sure, absolutely.
Just real quick. I mean, Cisco, the revenue grew 9%, take out Splunk, it declined 1%. But what's happening, Cisco is actually working. Their move to software and SaaS and subscriptions is working. So they were able to beat and raise. Again, that said, without Splunk in there, it wasn't so pretty, but hey, they made a good acquisition. They paid what, 24 billion, I think, 27 billion for Splunk. Rich number, but seems to be working. I think, Chuck Robbins is getting up there. I think he's in his early 60s maybe, so he wants to go out on a high note. So this could give him a little momentum, and he's got his new ELT, and it's good for them. Cisco is going to do well over 50 billion in this fiscal year, which that's a big number.
I mean, Chuck's a senior guy. He knows what to do. He got G2 running product. That's a great move. I think he brings energy and a great perspective. He also has a holistic view, right? So he's also got good first principles. I think you're going to see some simplification with Cisco in terms of messaging, but they have a huge business, right? I mean, Cisco is just, that's why, last time we were, laughing at the Juniper being held up with HPE. I think they got to let that go through. It's just crazy. And Cisco is continuing to do well. Interesting about the Splunk comment there on the earnings. Sounds like Splunk did contribute.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. The security business grew like crazy, but because of Splunk. And again, top line revenue grew 9%. Take Splunk out, it shrank. The core networking business is shrinking. So it's vital that they're able to make the transition to software. And of course, they're doing it as a public company, which is always a hard thing to do.
I want to talk about Databricks for a second because Databricks, you mentioned them earlier. They're doing very interesting things, and they just did a deal with SAP. So there's I'm doing an analysis piece right now, SAP and the Databricks partnership. This is basically a huge deal. So they have the business data cloud, okay? So SAP's got this thing called DataSphere, okay? And Databricks has this thing called business data cloud, okay? So they're taking the traditional workloads from SAP and essentially modernizing them, right? So SAP is sitting on a gold mine of many vast combinations of data sets. Okay, they're bringing that to Databricks' AI and analytics ecosystem. So it's a deep integration deal, very structured deal. It's complex deal. I'm under a gag order. There's some confidential stuff I can't talk about, and that they sent multiple messages around the relationship. But it is a deep relationship. It's not a Barney deal. That's not a love each other kind of, go to market, look at momentum deal. This is a real enterprise-wide data unification engineering deal. Okay. It's got multi-cloud flexibility kind of in there. So they're bringing the whole super cloud narrative. But SAP, it's a win for them because you look at what they've been doing with AWS is they have yielded to the fact that SAP is not going to rule the world, just like Salesforce and others aren't going to rule. In fact, Workday announced something with agents. We'll come back to that in a second, talk about our agentic builders event we're having. But SAP now can work with non-SAP data, okay, across AWS, GCP, and Azure. That is huge, Dave, because now SAP can be the business logic layer in all these agents, all these different applications. So the one thing that I was critical of SAP on, both privately and publicly, was when you try to land grab too much and you don't have the muscle, you got to capitulate into a position where you can win. And I think SAP is smart because they're saying, look, we're already won. They've won a lot of the market, but as the market changes, the market product fit becomes the challenge, not product market fit. So their product didn't fit the global multi-cloud super cloud market, but instead they're going to the market and adjusting it. So the deal with Databricks represents a competitive advantage, and I think Snowflake's out on the outside on this one. I'm doing some
Well,
digging on this,
I got
but
some data. I
I
got some
mean,
data for you.
yeah, give me some data on this because
Survey data.
I think they're out on out on this deal with
So I'm
SAP.
into the ETR data right now. I'm looking at, we've got 704 SAP accounts, and I could take out six. I'm taking out success factors and walk me, but so 704 SAP accounts. The overlap in those accounts, um, Databricks, 31% of those accounts have Databricks. Now, interestingly, to your point about Snowflake, 44% overlap in those accounts. Oracle, just put in Oracle because I know they got a lot, is 63%. IBM, of course, been around forever, almost 50%. IBM Watson, much lower, 11% overlap. So both Databricks and Snowflake are highly penetrated into SAP. And I suspect if Databricks is doing this, deal and it's more than a Barney deal with SAP, they will significantly increase that presence and probably, rocket past Snowflake. I don't know what Snowflake's got going on.
Well, I think anyone who's in the enterprise data business, whether it's Informatica, which had after hours drop after their earnings today, SAP, others, these are legacy vendors by today's standard. I wouldn't call Informatica legacy because they're doing state-of-the-art AI, but they are in the governance area. But this SAP Databricks partnership is a game changer for enterprise AI and data analytics because SAP is the king of structured data, right? Databricks is the king of kind of unstructured data and structured data, but they have the scalability of an AI platform with Mosaic ML and the data lakehouse stuff that they've been doing on, and with their open source they've been pushing. They can scale the traditional existing structured data. Okay, the deep integrations is the key to this deal. Go to market, that's everyone wins. SAP, I kind of cracked the code on that with how they're going to market with the clouds. But this actually puts Databricks in a position to be the AI leader, definitely in the SAP ecosystem, which is pretty much all the companies and big enterprises.
They
So
also,
this is a cloud and AI transformation for the data analytics business for the enterprise, and this gives SAP for the first time an AI first strategy, right, for data native decision making. So
Oh, it's a smart partnership. I mean, look what Microsoft has done with Databricks. And the other thing I'll tell you about Databricks, just looking at the data in terms of momentum, Snowflake maybe has a little bit more penetration. Naturally, they're a larger company, but Databricks has more momentum. In other words, the percentage of accounts that are spending more on Databricks is higher. Snowflake looks strong too, but Databricks, as they are overall, continues to impress with the spending velocity, which is an account measure. It's not a dollar measure.
So here's the stats on the deal with Databricks and SAP. Not to harp on this, 'cause I think this is going to be a watershed deal, similar to how VMware and AWS partnered together, even though that went into a different direction, was significant at the time. They announced it this week on the 13th. In April, they're launching on AWS. In May, they're launching on GCP. And in Q3, they're on Azure. Okay, so they're going to roll this out this year. The key to the business model is Databricks is BDC is going to be sold as a subscription bundle. They're calling this capacity units, which can be consumed across any one of the product mixes of this new system. Okay.
Yeah, that's how
So
Databricks sells. Yeah.
Databricks customers get access, will need the business data platform for SAP access. SAP customers have to are required to use Databricks services. So it's a intentional deal that has built-in kind of adoption. So this is not, again, not a lovey deal. Hey, we love each other. You know, Barney, we love you. You love me, kind of thing, as they say in the industry. It's a real engineering deal. So this will have ripple effects because SAP is already in the clouds, as is Databricks, and now Databricks has serverless, and with Mosaic ML coming on, I'm expecting a huge event this year for Databricks, this Data Plus AI Summit. So my guess is they'll be very model-centric, very DeepSeek-like in its conversations. I think it's going to be very much more of infrastructure integration and developer, developer, developer. So, you know, this is kind of a nuanced deal. It's not mainstream on the press, but significant in our world because this is in the stack and that, you know, in the middle of the stack where it's like no one's paying attention, but all the action is. I mean, all the action is in the middle of the stack. Agents are going to be a battleground. We're
I agree,
seeing agentic to be very frothy right now, which means people are gearing up their weaponry, their messages. We have an agent building summit in April, FYI, for people listening. theCUBE is holding in studio an agentic builder. So bring out the knives, baby. Let's go.
But
Sharpen
your
those
point about the
knives.
middle of the stack is right on. It's you know, the infrastructure. There's only so many infrastructure players. There's the cloud guys. There's Dell, HPE, Lenovo, and Supermicro. You know, and a couple. You know, obviously Pure and NetApp and you know, there's but in the middle of the stack, there's like all these governance vendors. There's all these data platform vendors. There's all these BI vendors. There's players like DBT and Fivetran, and I mean, there's just dozens and dozens and dozens of software companies in that middle layer. And then, of course, if you go up the stack, ISVs. I mean, it's mind-boggling how many ISVs there are that are all injecting agents and intelligence into their applications, and it's moving fast, no
Yeah.
doubt.
All right. Well, I know you got a tight deadline. It's Friday. I'm going to be heading to New York next week. We're going to be launching our new studio.
Quick, can we
The Treasury Secretary is going to be at the NYSE on Thursday. Just found that out this morning. So my texts are blowing up right now because it's going to be a big crypto roundtable. Ethereum, Vitalik is going to be in the US for the first time this month. So, I mean, it's amazing, Dave, what's going on.
Just want a quick, I saw the news on ARM that ARM is considering or developing its own chipsets. Did you see this?
I did.
Designing their own chips to compete essentially with their customers. I don't know if that's the right move. I mean, ARM, I mean, yeah, I can see it as a TAM expansion move, but maybe they've got enough market power because what's the alternative? RISC-V. But man, that's a big play. If they're going to start competing directly with all their customers, I'm not sure that's the right move. Now, I don't know. I haven't talked to ARM about why they're doing it, and I haven't dug into it. But do you know anything about that?
Well, we had Ami on. She's the CMO of ARM on our summit. She didn't mention anything about it. We did talk a lot about their ecosystem. ARM's kicking ass. There's two things going on with ARM. You mentioned the chips, but also there's also news today that NVIDIA just slashed its ownership percentage of ARM by about 45%. Okay, and so that's a signal. So here you got, ARM reducing its NVIDIA reducing its stake in ARM, but ARM now building its own chips. Interesting.
With Meta, by the way, John, right? Meta is their first design customer. So I'm like, what does that mean for like Broadcom? Obviously,
I think if you zoom out, everyone who listens to the pod knows we like to kind of peel back the onion a little bit on things, but let's zoom out this time and look at the big picture. We talked about the geopolitical landscape. That notwithstanding that, there's truly an arms race happening right now in infrastructure. The resources around chips and making chips absolutely is clearly being identified as a competitive advantage. Now, if you squint through the fog of the capex flurry, which Charles Fitzgerald Fitzy covers in great detail on his blog Platformomics, um, certainly there's a ton of spend. You can always question, hey, where's it going? But to me, if you read the tea leaves, it tells you one thing: if you don't vertically integrate from the silicon level up, you're screwed. In my opinion, that's what's happening. So I think everyone's seeing that resource-based competitive advantage will be the modus operandi for these companies, because one of the key resources will be not just power and cooling and physical space. Like I said, data centers are sold out. You're gonna have to go to places where, like Phoenix, with a lot of sun, which could be solar. Water will be a challenge. We'll see what happens there. But you got to control the resource. Resource will be in the future creativity at the human level. That's the top of the stack. Go all the way down to the bottom of the stack. That's semiconductors. Controlling your own chips, controlling the supply chain. And we've been saying here on theCUBE now, what, for at least over a year, and most recently on a regular basis, that the coding alpha geeks are coding down to the assembler, kernel, machine level. Okay. And if anything, DeepSeek educated the world on is the fact that they're getting down to the lower levels. Now, that's not a bug, that's a feature, because the democratization is happening at the top of the stack. So as developers get more code assistance, more low code, no code capabilities, that's going to create a plethora of applications. AI is going to do all that. In journalism, we see it with writing. You're going to see it with coding. So I think AI will completely change the human equation at the top of the stack, and all the value will be moving down to the bottom. So I think you're starting to see the phase one of the new competitive strategy and technology, which is own the resource. And that's an open question. What does that even mean, resource? For some companies like Meta, it's got to be control your own destiny. We heard Mark Zuckerberg say publicly that he doesn't want to ever be at the beck and call of Apple. Okay, again, that's
So,
just this. You're
I
starting
mean,
to see if people controlling their own destiny in AI. That's going to be the key.
it's
It's not an easy thing to squint through, but that's what I see happening.
it's not that expensive to design chips if you're doing, mature nodes and relatively medium complexity. You're talking about tens of millions of dollars. You got relatively low mass cost. You got simpler
Yeah,
tools. If you start to do advanced nodes, get down below 7, 5, 3 nanometers, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars now. I mean,
yeah,
you got way more expensive mass costs. You got an EDA licensing cost. You got a lot of sort of testing, and then the very leading edge stuff where you're doing CPUs and GPUs and accelerators and stuff like what Apple's doing. And what Amazon's doing. You're many hundreds of millions. You're probably pushing a billion. So I guess the question would be, I agree, by the way, we joked, many pods ago that theCUBE was going to do its own silicon. But
yeah.
the question is,
Who
okay,
knows? It could be in our future.
but I
You
think the
know.
things that companies have to ask themselves is, A, is it in my DNA? Can I actually pull this off? And B, are there other places where maybe further up the stack where I can invest? So for
Yeah,
instance, Oracle, I've asked this question many times of Oracle. Um, Ellison and Juan Loaiza, and they've said, yeah, we prefer to partner. Dell as well, same thing. So maybe their feeling is it's not in our DNA, and we can spend the money, elsewhere. But then the flip side of that is you look at the competitive advantages given Apple in laptops and
yeah,
Tesla in full self-driving and automotive. And obviously Google and Amazon, and so now Microsoft's getting into the act, but of course they can afford it. So, and it's almost table stakes for them. They have to be in it, and
yeah.
in Meta, doing it with partners with Broadcom and Amazon with Marvell and Google with Broadcom as well. So
Yeah. I mean, look,
having
I mean,
a hand in that, if you're a major player in the industry, it's almost compulsory.
yeah, but again, you look at the infrastructure powers everything, right? So the data layer, we talked about that's where the battle is, sharpen the knives, as we were joking earlier. But I mean, if you look at what's happening in the market with the real signals, a lot of people are confused. For example, all the financial analysts are like scratching their heads on earnings. So the software earnings season's kicking off in full swing, and the software is impacted by what's going on with the silicon. So if you look at DeepSeek and look at the innovations with, say, Dell with the AI factories, and they got the deal with XAI, you got HP. As the hardware gets better, the software will adjust. It's always been that in these big cycles. Look at the PC revolution, server revolution, Gen 1. Every time a new innovation from a software perspective came out, it was always after some increase in silicon. New Intel processor, Windows gets better. Next version comes out, and that flywheel continues. So right now, the software earnings are some would say uninspiring right now. Multiples are kind of leveling down. You got inflation in there, but put that aside. What people aren't factoring in is that the impact that the software guys are going to have as they have to refactor. And this came out clearly in our CMO summit, something that's even off the reservation relative to the analysis. But as CMOs completely change how they do business and marketing to the companies, it's technology driven. AI will be a factor. That's going to change their workflows and how they handle data. That means all those companies selling software to that persona are going to either be out of business or in transition. So again, you win in transition. I put that post up on last week. Everyone wins in transition. So my reaction right now is the software market probably is going to be in a mid-tide situation where earnings will fluctuate back and forth. People will pontificate about inflation rates, guide consensus beating, whatever. But I think that will explode in a positive way as this DeepSeek moment educates the enterprise that there's what ChatGPT did early on. You're going to see a renaissance and a huge Cambrian explosion of new applications. I think that will change the software landscape. So, I'm not sure I'd be holding a lot of software companies right now. If I did, I'd be squinting through, are they on the right side of history relative to the infrastructure enablement? So if you're a software investor, you got to look beyond the quarter to quarter growth and say, what's the year trajectories look like? And so again, it's very nuanced, very in the weeds, but to me, that's going to be, and that's why this agent thing is so compelling, because no matter what you believe about the hype of it, when the timing of it, it's going to happen. Okay. It's already happening. That is software. And that's why I love this whole DeepSeek publicity thing, because it's not just about DeepSeek, it's the DeepSeek style of software innovation that will take advantage of the infrastructure. So again, if Dell knocks down that $5 billion deal, then Dell's looking like they're back. So again, back to the competitive action. It's awesome, Dave. I got to tell you, it's not awesome if you're in the arena, because a death blow could come at a moment's notice, right? You don't know. If you're on the wrong side of this AI wave, you're driftwood, as Pat Gelsinger used to say on theCUBE. So you got to get this right. So it's going to be very interesting to see. And of course, we'll be tracking it like crazy.
All right, dude, I got to go.
All right, Dave, we'll see you next time, and see you in New York. Heading out.
See you next week.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Hello, everyone. Welcome to theCUBE. I'm John Furrier, your host. Join theCUBE and myself at RSA 2025 this year, taking place in San Francisco, April 28th to May 1st. This is an unparalleled cybersecurity experience. This is an opportunity to dive into expert-led sessions, discover groundbreaking solutions, and network with top industry leaders from around the world. Whether you're looking to sharpen your skills, explore new trends, or connect with like-minded professionals, there's something for everybody. Come away with new strategies, insights, and connections to elevate your game in the cybersecurity journey. Many voices, one community. Check out rsa.com/thecube25 to learn more and register. That's rsaconference.com/thecube25 to learn more and register.